What if we didn't invent civilization, but just picked up where someone else left off? Imagine the first kings of Earth, not boasting about forging thrones from nothing, but quietly inheriting them from hands that had already mapped the stars, carved up the land, and written the rules. In the quiet corners of museum archives, under the hum of climate control, old clay tablets sit behind glass. They wait. 5,000 years ago, someone pressed those wedge-shaped marks into wet clay. Each one feels like a whispered confession that upends everything we think we know about our origins. Before we jump into this strange idea, just pause for a second. Let go of whatever's happening around you. Maybe you're reading this late at night, the world outside hushed. If you are, leave a mark. Jot down the time, the place. It helps to picture this story drifting across different hours and continents, slipping into the space between wakefulness and dreams. This story doesn't really start with discovery. It begins with dust and a stubborn kind of patience. In the late 1800s, when archaeologists from Europe and America started digging around southern Mesopotamia, they thought they'd find the clumsy beginnings of society. Tiny villages, rough tools, people fumbling through their first attempts at writing, counting, organizing themselves, sort of like toddlers learning to walk. But what they actually found was Sumer, a civilization that, around 3500 BCE, shows up in the record already shockingly advanced. They were reading and writing, building cities with geometric precision, the kind of precision that modern folks wouldn't match for thousands of years. The tablets they uncovered from ruined libraries weren't awkward scrawls or primitive checklists. They were tracking the movements of Venus across decades. They were drawing up legal contracts with interest rates and property lines. They described medical procedures, listed hymns to gods whose names disappeared for 4 millennia. And the clay survived because, weirdly enough, fire made it stronger instead of destroying it. Now picture yourself at one of those dig sites. The hot Iraqi sun is beating down while you brush away layers of dirt from a small, cool chunk of clay. Hundreds of tiny wedges catch the light, each one pressed by a reed stylus held by a hand that's been dust longer than your entire country has existed. Sometimes, if you look close enough, you can even spot fingerprints. The swirls and ridges of a Sumerian scribe, frozen in time, reaching out across 5,000 years. Those scribes wrote something that still makes historians uneasy. Over and over in texts separated by centuries but sharing the same story, they said kingship came from the sky. That all the things we link to civilization, writing, math, astronomy, architecture, law, weren't inventions. They were gifts. Humans weren't inventors but caretakers, tasked with remembering, preserving, and keeping alive what had been set up before a great flood wiped the slate clean. The Sumerians called their teachers the Anunnaki. The word itself means those who from heaven to earth came, or children of Anu, the sky god who kept the universe in order. The Anunnaki show up in thousands of texts, not as distant, mysterious gods, but as officials, judges, teachers. They walked among people, set up the basics of civilized life, and then faded into legend. So who were they? Not the mythic gods the Babylonians or Assyrians turned them into later. Not the airy cosmic forces the Greeks and Romans dreamed up. The earliest Sumerian stories describe the Anunnaki as beings with jobs, personalities, and clear responsibilities. They managed a world that needed order before humans were ready to handle it themselves. Imagine Enki, lord of the Abzu, the freshwater under the earth. An ancient seal from Ur, dated to 2500 BCE, shows him on a throne, water pouring from his shoulders, fish swimming in the streams, plants sprouting from fertile ground. That's not just poetic language, that's his job description. Enki ran water management, the foundation of all civilization in Mesopotamia. The hymns to Enki don't just praise some vague wisdom, they celebrate hydraulic engineering. He set the house in order, laid down the measuring rod and measuring line. Those are surveyors' tools, used to plan canals and irrigation. Another text talks about him handing over the pickaxe and the basket, teaching people the hard work of digging canals. This isn't mystical allegory, it's hands-on instruction. Dig into the temple records from Eridu, Enki's old stomping ground, and you find something oddly specific. They kept detailed administrative texts about the upkeep of the Karjestan, the wine key, basically, the spot where boats showed up with tribute. These records list out the tonnage, what kind of cargo came in, who got what rations. And at the top of every ledger you see the same thing, according to the measurement of Enki. Not blessed by Enki, not in honor of Enki. No, it's as if Enki himself set the standards, the units, the whole accounting system. Now tucked away in the quietest part of the British Museum's Mesopotamian collection, there's this tablet, BM 34062. It's stranger still. It's a math text from around 1800 BCE, but the scribe says they copied it from tablets before the Great Water. The source: from the house of Enki in Eridu, before the city was abandoned. The math is all about figuring out how water flows through canals, considering width, depth, slope, friction, all the stuff you need for real fluid dynamics, written in Sumerian and credited to a god who ruled over freshwater. And it makes you wonder, what if Enki wasn't some distant, miracle-working god, but more like a governor, an administrator, an engineer? Someone who taught people how to handle floods because they needed it to survive. The texts say he had namku, usually called wisdom or cunning, but literally it means the knowledge of secrets. Not just any secrets, but technical know-how, the kind of skills that let you shape nature. Then there's Enlil, lord of the air, storms, agriculture. While Enki comes across as patient and clever, Enlil feels like the boss, decisive, sometimes harsh. His temple at Nippur was Jur-Enkai, the bond of heaven and earth, and it ran the show for Sumer. Kings had to go there for legitimacy. Laws from Nippur mattered everywhere. Enlil's word was law. But look closer. Enlil doesn't pull off miracles in the texts, he allocates. There's a hymn from Nippur that spells out his job. He determined the destinies, he made the divine laws permanent, he organized the earth. The word for organized is gina. It means to make firm, set things in order, bring structure out of chaos. Sounds more like a bureaucrat than a mystical figure. In the Atrahasis epic, when Enlil calls for the flood, it's not because of some moral outrage. The text is blunt. Humanity got too loud, too numerous, too disruptive. Enlil goes for population control to solve an administrative headache. The other Anunnaki talk it over. Enki pushes back. Nintu cries. It's a council meeting, not a thunderbolt from the heavens. They're wrestling with resource management, trying to keep things sustainable. So the flood wasn't exactly punishment, it was policy. And when Enki tips off Ziusudra, even though Enlil said otherwise, you can see the cracks. The Anunnaki didn't always agree. They had factions, different ideas about how to run the world now that their workforce had become so big, so independent. Then there's Inanna, later called Ishtar, goddess of love and war and tied to Venus. Today, we see those as symbols, abstract ideas, but the Sumerian texts don't really do metaphor here. Inanna's link to Venus is direct. She's Venus, just as Enki is freshwater and Enlil is wind. At Uruk, temple astronomers tracked Venus obsessively. Their tablets log Venus's risings, settings, retrogrades, conjunctions, every movement. They don't study Inanna, they track her cycles, her moods. When Venus was visible, certain rituals could go ahead. When it vanished, wars paused, treaties waited. Inanna's realm was literally tied to the planet's movements and how they lined up with human events. One tablet from Uruk even spells it out. When Venus disappeared behind the sun, the text says, Inanna has descended to the underworld. The ordinances are suspended until her return. No poetry, no myth, just a practical note. While Venus is gone, anything that depends on her timing is on hold. When Venus shows up again, the text just comes right out and says it. Inanna has returned from the underworld bearing the me. The me, those ancient rules and blueprints for civilization, aren't just spiritual blessings. She's handing back access to knowledge about the skis, about the timing of everything important from planting crops to going to war. So, what if the whole myth about Inanna's descent, the one we usually treat as a spiritual metaphor, is really just ancient astronomy wrapped up in a story? Maybe that tale carries old, hard-won wisdom about the movements of planets. Maybe it survived because people kept retelling it, even after they forgot what the numbers and symbols actually meant. The texts themselves give hints. The myth lays out specific numbers of days. Inanna passes through 7 gates like the 7 visible planets. Each time she loses a piece of clothing, Venus gets dimmer as it moves closer to the sun. That's not random poetry. It's a clever way to hang on to data back when stories were the only way to store information. They didn't have graphs or science textbooks. They had myths. And then there's Ninmah, also known as Ninhursag Nintu, Mommy, a goddess with a string of names. Her story in the creation myths is weirdly specific. She doesn't just breathe life into clay or speak people into existence. She gets her hands dirty. She mixes stuff together, tries different things, fails, and fixes her mistakes. The Enki and Ninmah story, found on ancient tablets from Nippur and Ur, reads almost like a lab notebook. Ninmah took clay from the top of the Abzu and fashioned a human being. Not created by divine command, but fashioned, shaped, worked. The clay is from the Abzu, freshwater mud loaded with minerals. That's a real material choice, not just poetic fluff. Then Enki adds the blood of a god. The word they use is damu, which means blood, but also essence or even some kind of vital spark. The god Wheeler gets killed and he's said to have Timu, intelligence, consciousness. Something from Wheeler gets extracted and mixed into the clay. The story doesn't spell out what, but it acts like this is a real, transferable ingredient, something that can turn mud into a thinking creature. They have to try a few times. Early attempts don't work out. One can't control urination, another can't see, a third can't speak. Ninmah keeps tweaking her process until she finally gets a human that can reproduce and work. It's trial and error. That's not just myth-making, it's documentation. It's the language of experiments. Try, fail, adjust, and try again until you get it right. Today, people brush this off as ancient folks inventing stories to explain disabilities. But if that's all it was, why lay out the process step by step? Why bother with the failures? Why not just jump to the perfect creation? Unless, maybe, the failures mattered because they really happened. Maybe these stories record memories of actual experiments, not just metaphors. What if Ninmah wasn't a goddess but an early scientist? Someone doing biology, gene tinkering, whatever you want to call it, with words like clay and blood because they didn't have better terms. Maybe these myths are their best shot at describing a process they couldn't fully explain, dressing up technical know-how in the only language they had. Myth. The tablets never pretend to understand every detail. They just copy what's been handed down, even when the meaning gets murky. That stubborn faithfulness, copying without changing, even when they don't get it, might be what lets a bit of real truth slip through. Not necessarily about gods, but about some process, a piece of knowledge older than the flood, saved by scribes who sensed it mattered, even if they didn't know why. There's a tablet at Yale, YBC 4499, that shows Enki talking to Ninmah after their work is done. Enki asks, "Will they remember?" Ninmah answers, "They will remember only fragments, and those fragments will become stories." Part of the text is missing, but that exchange survives. It's clear and honestly a little haunting. It's like the creators themselves knew their work would fade, get turned into myths, and live on only as stories that nobody really understands anymore. What if that really is what happened? What if the Anunnaki saw disaster coming and knew the flood would cut off everything? Communications, stories, maybe even the memory of who we were. People would be left with scraps, trying to piece things together from whatever they could remember. What if all those myths, the obsessively copied tablets, the careful preservation, what if that was their way of holding on to knowledge that was already slipping away, even as they wrote it down? Modern thinking just can't wrap its head around this. We've grown up with the idea that civilization is slow, that people stumble forward learning bit by bit, inventing things from scratch. The Sumerians don't fit that story at all. Their civilization doesn't grow. It just shows up, fully formed, like someone handed them the instructions and said, "Here, build this." Look at their math. The Sumerians used base 60, sexagesimal counting. That's still shaping our lives, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. None of that is random. It's Sumerian, and it's stuck around because base 60 is actually brilliant. It divides easily, has more factors than base 10, and it's perfect for astronomy, geometry, and trade. Most ancient cultures took centuries to even approach this kind of abstract thinking. But the Sumerians had it from the jump. There's no evidence of them working their way up to it. They just had it. The same thing shows up in their astronomy. Clay tablets from Nippur and Uruk chart Venus's cycle to the day 584 days, dead on with what we know now. They tracked Jupiter and Saturn across decades. They even understood the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. Getting that right isn't something you do in a single lifetime. It takes generations, careful records, relentless comparison. So how did the so-called first civilization already know all this, unless they weren't actually first? The deeper archaeologists dug in Sumerian cities, the weirder things got. Take Eridu, the oldest known settlement. Instead of rough beginnings, they found layer after layer of sophisticated temples, reaching back almost 8,000 years. Every time a temple needed rebuilding, they didn't just slap something new on top. They carefully took it apart, rebuilt it right on the same spot, using the same plan and the same sacred geometry. It's like they were following a tradition so old that even the builders had forgotten where the original idea came from. Picture standing in that pit, dust everywhere, years of digging behind you. Back in the 1940s, Fuad Safar and Seton Lloyd led a team at Eridu that basically dug through time. Temple I at the top, built around 2000 BCE, was already impressive, a huge mud brick platform with a shrine perfectly aligned to the cardinal points. Then they found Temple II, older but with the same plan. Then Temple III, then IV. Each one had been buried before the next was built, each one keeping the exact same orientation, each one just making the template a little bigger. By the time they reached Temple XVI, the very bottom, they were looking at something from about 5400 BCE, as old as the first farming villages, but it wasn't primitive. That lowest shrine was rectangular with buttressed walls, perfectly placed, offering niches, an altar in the center, and a hearth for sacred fire. The proportions were just right. The craftsmanship was careful. The design wasn't developing. It was already finished. Someone 7,000 years ago set the template. For the next 5,000 years, every generation rebuilt that exact pattern, never changing, never upgrading, just keeping the original blueprint alive. The size might change, but the geometry stayed the same. Why? Because changing it meant losing the connection to whatever knowledge had created the first design. And here's the part that really bugs modern archaeologists. Those oldest temples at Eridu were built at the same time as nearby Ubaid villages, settlements with nothing fancy, just plain mud brick huts, crooked layouts, no sign of urban planning. But at Eridu, there's careful geometry, astronomical alignment, intentional design. It's like knowledge just landed there, fully formed, instead of slowly evolving like everywhere else. American archaeologist Samuel Noah Kramer spent years wrestling with Sumerian texts, and even he couldn't ignore the oddities he found. Eridu represents a discontinuity, Kramer scribbled down in 1956. The first temple at Eridu was just too advanced for its time. By all logic, something that complex shouldn't have existed in that cultural setting. Either we're missing entire chapters of earlier history, or maybe, just maybe, the old Sumerian tales were right, and Eridu really was where kingship first descended from heaven. The city itself stood on a man-made mound, older than the temples on top of it. In the 1980s, geologists teamed up with the University of Baghdad and dug out core samples. What they found was wild. The mound wasn't just a pile of dirt left by nature. It had layers of flood-borne silt, but the whole thing was clearly built on purpose, to lift the sacred zone above the floods. Someone knew the water would come, so they built high to keep their temples dry. They planned for it. Then there's Bad Tabira, listed second on the king list, the city where kingship moved after Eridu. Hardly anyone's dug there, mostly because Iraq's political mess has made real archaeology impossible. Still, back in the 1960s, Robert Massey Adams did some surface surveys and found heaps of slag, traces of furnaces, and evidence of serious metalworking. The city's name, Bad Tabira, literally means fortress of metalworking. This was an industrial center, and the few tablets found there don't tell stories about gods performing magical feats. They talk about Anu giving people the craft of smithing. Not a miracle, but a skill. Something you could learn, teach, pass down. That idea shows up again and again. Craft, not just wonder. The tablets are clear. Anu didn't forge the metals himself. He handed over the know-how, showed them how it was done, and let people take it from there. Move on to Sippar, the fourth pre-flood city. Its name translates to City of the Sun God, and later temple records paint it as a center for watching the skies. The ziggurats weren't just for worship. They were observatories, outfitted with tools and special rooms aligned to track the sun's movements, the solstices and equinoxes. In the early 1900s, American teams uncovered tablets from Sippar calling the place the House of Illumination, where the secrets of heaven were revealed to the appointed watchers. The watchers weren't priests in the way we'd imagine. They were the first astronomers. They tracked the stars and planets, kept logs, and those records became the backbone of Mesopotamian astronomy. People copied those observation logs for centuries, and thanks to them, Babylonian astronomers could predict eclipses and keep track of the shifting sky. And all this, the texts say, began before the flood. One clay tablet puts it plainly. In the days when Sippar stood beneath the protection of Udu, the secrets were given to humanity so that time itself could be measured and the seasons would not be forgotten. That's how knowledge survived disaster, because people needed to know when to plant, when to harvest, and when the floods would hit. Shuruppak, the fifth city and the home of Ziusudra during the Great Flood, actually has been thoroughly excavated. Back in the 1920s and 30s, German archaeologist Erich Schmidt unearthed thousands of tablets from the city's last days. Most are dead simple: receipts, payroll, land records. Just the paperwork of a city convinced it would last forever. But then, suddenly, it all stops. No more tablets after about 2900 BCE. Silence, until you dig through the thick flood layer and find older buildings and artifacts buried beneath meters of silt. When archaeologists finally hit that flood deposit at Shuruppak, they stumbled onto something you wouldn't expect. Scattered in the silt were tablets, not random debris, but tablets carefully sealed in clay jars, deliberately buried as the floodwaters rose. Someone, in a rush against disaster, took the time to rescue records, packing them away in waterproof containers and burying them deep, hoping they'd survive the deluge. Most jars cracked under the weight of centuries. Most tablets just turned to mud, but a handful made it. In 1931, workers pulled out a few battered but readable tablets from 11 feet below the surface. What they found inside was surprising, not desperate prayers or last-minute pleas to the gods, but instructions. Instructions for rebuilding irrigation systems after a flood, how to purify water when the wells turn foul, how to figure out harvest yields from battered, washed-out soil, and right there alongside the practical stuff, directions for putting society back together after losing half the population. These aren't holy scriptures, just disaster manuals, written by people who saw the flood coming and wanted their descendants to have a fighting chance. One day, an American archaeologist named Leon Legring cracked open a jar and found a text he'd later translate in 1937. At the end was a colophon, a kind of signature line that read, "Written by Shuruppak, son of Ubartudu, in the days before the Great Water, so that what was known would not be entirely forgotten." Shuruppak, by the old king list, was Ziusudra's father. Ubartudu, the last king before the flood. So here's a message from the very family of the flood hero, written on clay and stashed away. hoping someone would find it after the world washed clean. The instructions themselves are blunt. When the waters recede, wait 7 days before returning to the fields. The first planting will fail, the soil must rest. Use the old seed, not new, as the old carries the strength of what was before. This isn't abstract wisdom. It's survival, hammered out by trial and error, saved so the next generation wouldn't starve. There's more. The stars will guide you when the landmarks are gone. Ursa Major points north, unchanged by any flood. Build your temples facing the sunrise of spring equinox, and the foundations will be true. Simple, practical advice that manages to combine astronomy with architecture, clear enough for anyone to follow, even if they didn't know the math. Now those tablets just sit in museum storerooms. Fragile, cracked, hard to read. But inside them is the voice of people who saw disaster coming, couldn't stop it, and decided the best they could do was prepare others to survive. Knowledge, packed tight into clay, buried deep, just waiting for someone to dig through the mud and reclaim what their ancestors desperately tried to save. In Uruk, the White Temple rose up on a platform, each corner lined up almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. The city's walls ran for 6 miles, built from millions of mud bricks, each one shaped, carried, and set in place by thousands of workers. Just organizing that kind of project is mind-boggling. It's the sort of thing you'd expect from a civilization that had spent centuries working up to it. But Uruk's walls were there from the start. The old texts add to the puzzle. They don't brag about achievements. Instead, they talk about restoration. Over and over, carved into stone meant to last longer than any kingdom, you see the same phrase. This is the restoration of what was before. Not I built this. Not look at my greatness. Just restoration. It's like the Sumerians saw themselves as archaeologists, not inventors, digging through catastrophes' aftermath, trying to unearth lost knowledge. And through everything they wrote, a single theme keeps coming up. There was a world before the flood, when knowledge flowed freely. Rulers lived for ages, and visitors from the heavens taught people to measure the stars, write the laws, and build cities that would last. The Anunnaki ruled side by side with humanity, until they withdrew and left people to run things they never designed. The silence in museum halls presses in. Behind glass, the tablets wait. Testimony from people who never claimed to be first, who always insisted they were inheritors, the last generation that remembered what the flood had washed away. What if they were telling the truth? What if kingship really did descend from heaven, and our job was never to create but to keep? What if the Anunnaki aren't just legend but memory? In a storage room at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, there's a clay prism about the size of a wine bottle, found in 1906 by Hermann Hilprecht under the ruins of Nippur's Temple Library. Its surface is packed with cuneiform, crisp impressions from around 2100 BCE. It isn't a hymn or a myth or even a poem. It's a list, dry and precise, a record a civilization makes when it has to prove who's in charge and why. The text opens with a line that's puzzled historians for more than 100 years. After kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu, not after humans invented kingship, not after the first king seized power. No, descended. As if rule itself existed out there somewhere, above the world, waiting to be lowered down like a prize or a burden meant for us to carry. What comes next is the Sumerian king list, a document that splits history in two. There's a before and after divided by one shattering event. Before the flood, 8 kings ruled 5 cities, and their reigns stretch on for tens of thousands of years. Ululim of Eridu for 28,800 years, Alaugr for 36,000, Enmenluana for 43,200. The numbers just sit there on the clay, written as plainly as grain tallies or tax records. Then it suddenly shifts. The flood swept over. That's the line. Everything after changes. Kingship descends from heaven again, this time to the city of Kish. Now the kings who follow rule for decades or a few centuries, still exaggerated, but at least they're within the bounds of human life. The otherworldly ages are over. Mortality returns. The era of gods fades and the age of men begins. For generations, scholars have tried to explain those ancient numbers. Some say they add up dynasties, not lives. Some argue they're symbolic astronomical cycles, mythic eras. Others think later scribes stretched the numbers to make old kings seem divine. But none of these ideas really fit. The numbers are too precise, too methodically reduced, and the Sumerians themselves treated this list as fact, not myth. They copied it for centuries, cited it in court, used it to settle borders. The king list wasn't just a religious story. It was a constitutional record. And if that pre-flood section points to something real, whether it's astronomy, collective memory, or stories about rulers before disaster hit, then you can't dodge the big question. Who did the Sumerians think ruled before humans? Picture holding one of those tablets. Museum staff won't let you, but just imagine it. The clay cool and gritty in your hands, the wedge marks still sharp in places, blurred in others. Each mark was a choice, a piece of history saved on purpose. The scribe who made this copy, around 2100 BCE, already called his sources ancient. He was looking back into a past he couldn't quite reach, trying to save knowledge whose origins were lost even to him. Near the bottom of some versions, there are notes that go beyond just names. These pre-flood rulers get labeled by type, Anunnaki. That word pops up everywhere in Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian texts. Later, the Anunnaki become gods, judges of the dead, enforcers of cosmic law. But in the earliest stories, it's more down to earth. Those who from heaven to earth came. Children of Anu, the sky god, the force of order. There's nothing worshipful about how they're described. Nobody begs them for mercy or blessing. Instead, they show up in records about running cities, assigning land, measuring time, writing laws. They act more like administrators than the gods we imagine. Less miracle, more meeting. One text has the Anunnaki setting the farming calendar. Another says they decide humanity's fate before the flood. Temple hymns call them the great gods who decree destinies. But those destinies are about harvests and water rights and borders. The tone isn't mystical, it's bureaucratic. That's what sets the Anunnaki apart from the gods of later myths. They don't work wonders, they allocate resources. They don't inspire rapturous hymns, they issue orders. They hold councils, argue, get tired of running things and create humans to take over some of the work. They mess up, regret things, eat, drink, hold grudges, make peace. In short, they act a lot more like people, just with a bigger job. When you look at the old Sumerian creation myths, the ones dug up from Nippur and a bunch of other ancient cities, the whole story of how the Anunnaki made humans reads less like a miracle and more like a series of experiments. It's the goddess Nintu, working alongside Enki, the clever god who does the job. She grabs clay, scoops it from the earth, and then mixes it with the blood of a slain god. The story doesn't shy away from details. Clay for the body, divine blood for the spark, and the womb of the birth goddess as the mixing bowl. Here, what happens next. Nintu rolls up her sleeves and gets to work. She pinches off bits of clay, stirs in the divine essence, shapes the forms. She manages to make 7 beings, but none of them turn out right. One can't control his bladder. Another can barely speak. There's one with bad eyes, another whose hands won't move. The text just keeps going, listing all these early versions, each one with its own flaw. But instead of tossing them aside, the gods give each a specific job, something that fits their individual defect. The whole thing feels like reading a notebook from a workshop, not a hymn. It's all try, fail, fix, try again. Eventually, Nintu and Enki figure it out. They adjust, tweak, and finally create humans who work the way they're supposed to. They can reproduce, they can build, they can keep society running. The entire process feels practical, step by step, not a flash of magic. The gods aren't just snapping their fingers and making people appear. They're experimenting, shaping, learning as they go. It's more like engineering than anything else. The strangest part, the reason humans get made in the first place, it's not about love or spiritual enlightenment or even worship. Humans are put here to work, to dig irrigation canals, to maintain temples, to handle the daily grind the gods don't want to deal with. Let man bear the yoke, the tablet says. Let him carry the basket of the gods. It's not a grand declaration about the nobility of the human spirit. It's a job listing. People today usually brush this off as nothing more than myth. The alternative is just too weird, that maybe the Sumerians were recording something they actually saw, or at least something passed down to them, using the only language they had, stories about gods doing what people saw but couldn't explain. Most other cultures' creation myths skip the messy part. Genesis, God makes humans, done. The Greeks, Prometheus shapes people out of clay, gives them fire, and that's that. Nobody else writes about all the mistakes, the broken prototypes, the endless trial and error. Only the Sumerians talk about failure, about fixing mistakes, about slowly getting it right. That's not what you do if you're just making up a parable. Why structure your story like a workshop log unless you're trying to remember the process? Back then, nobody had words for genetics or heredity. If someone saw selective breeding or genetic tinkering, how would they explain it? They'd reach for metaphors, stories about gods, blood, and clay, because they had nothing else. Even the tablets themselves push you toward this interpretation. They read like instructions, with steps and outcomes, not like poems or sermons. It all sounds more like technical notes dressed up as myth, because that's the only framework they had. What if the Sumerians didn't just invent these stories? What if they were passing down scraps of memory about where we came from, clues left over from some long-forgotten age before writing existed? Picture Iraq before dawn. The desert wind kicking up dust, maybe dust that was once temple walls. The ruins of Uruk barely showing above the sand. Eridu hidden under tarps. Somewhere in that darkness, in the marks pressed into old clay tablets, the Anunnaki are still there. We know their names and the roles they played, but we can't quite fit them into any neat box, myth, or history. If you really sit with these stories, one question starts to echo, and honestly, it's a little unsettling. What if kingship really did come down from the heavens? What if the Anunnaki weren't just made up, but are memories of something or someone who actually ran things before humans took charge? There's a cylinder seal from Uruk, about 2600 BCE. 7 figures seated in judgment, arranged in order, bearded and robed, each holding something that shows who they are. Above them, a line of cuneiform, the Anunnaki, the great gods who decree fate. You find them everywhere, on temple walls, in hymns, and legal texts. They have names, family trees, jobs, connections. They're everywhere in the ancient world, impossible to ignore and impossible to explain away. Enki stands at the top of the Anunnaki. He's in charge of freshwater, wisdom, and all things crafty. The temple hymns don't paint him as some muse sparking human genius. Instead, he's the one who lifts the veil, unlocks the house of knowledge, hands over the tablet. He teaches people how to manage water, count, and calculate, write things down. The way these stories tell it, he doesn't invent anything new. He just shows humanity what's already there, waiting for someone to notice. Enlil, he's the guy behind wind and storms, the one who calls the shots on crops. Will they thrive or wither? That's his decision. His temple at Nippur wasn't just famous. People called it the world's navel, the spot where heaven and earth meet. No one ruled without Enlil's blessing. If they tried, their rule didn't count. That detail matters because it tells you how people saw power. It didn't come from human effort or ambition. It flowed down from the gods. Inanna takes charge of war, love, and Venus in the sky. The old tablets actually tracked her planet's movements, not just with guesses, but with the kind of accuracy that takes generations to build up. She's not just some goddess of feelings or abstract ideas. She's tied to a real planet, one you can spot, chart, and predict. Udu runs justice and keeps the sun on its daily path. Ninursag looks after births and the land's fertility. These aren't just vague job descriptions. Each god covers a clear, almost bureaucratic domain, like you'd see on an organizational chart, not in some faraway mythical world. What really sets the Anunnaki apart from later gods is how down-to-earth they seem in the earliest records. They don't throw thunderbolts or turn into animals. No epic battles with monsters either. Instead, they divide up resources, settle arguments, keep time, and draw the lines between order and chaos. In Sumerian thinking, chaos isn't just a word, it's Abzu, the waters below, and Tiamat, the salty sea. Both are unruly forces that need to be measured and controlled if you want civilization to last. Enki's main job is managing the Abzu, making sure water flows through canals, not over people's homes. It's basically ancient hydraulic engineering, dressed up in cosmic terms. If you spend enough time with these texts, the line between story and memory starts to blur. There's a tablet from Lagash around 2400 BCE that's just a legal case. A fight over water rights between two temple estates. It records claims, witness statements, and finally the verdict. And then at the end, almost like an afterthought, comes this line: the Anunnaki, the great gods, have made this decision binding. Not as miracle workers, not as some supernatural police force, but as the final authority, the top of the bureaucratic ladder. The tablet treats the Anunnaki the way we might name-check a Supreme Court. Their power isn't about magic, it's about recognized jurisdiction. That's how the Anunnaki show up in the oldest Sumerian sources, not as distant objects of worship, but as cosmic administrators, the ones keeping everything running. Their name comes up over 2,000 times across cuneiform texts stretching out for nearly 3,000 years. But the oldest writings, before 2000 BCE, before the myths piled up, are strikingly consistent. These gods measure, judge, allocate, decree. They're the gears behind civilization. Then something shifts. The Atrahasis epic from around 1800 BCE pulls from older Sumerian stories and describes a crisis. Humanity multiplies out of control. The noise of daily life gets to the Anunnaki, and Lil makes a call: flood the world. Here, the twist people often miss. The flood isn't punishment for sin. It's a practical move to bring down the population. The language is cold, almost bureaucratic. After the flood, the Anunnaki don't come back to rule directly. Instead, they set new terms: shorter lifespans, less fertility, more distance between gods and humans. The text frames this as a treaty, a negotiated deal between two sides that can't live on top of each other anymore. The Anunnaki don't die or lose. They step back deliberately, leaving humans to run the systems they put in place. The Sumerian king list makes this break obvious. After the flood, kingship returns from heaven, but now it's for humans. The reigns shrink to mortal scale. The age of cosmic administration is over. What these texts capture isn't the Anunnaki showing up, but the moment they leave, leaving behind cities, laws, calendars, and a lingering sense that the world, once upon a time, was run with more care than we see today. So if the Anunnaki really did rule openly at one point, what finally brought their reign to an end? The answer's buried right under the old Sumerian cities, in the dirt itself. Back in 1929, Leonard Woolley was digging up the royal cemetery at Ur when his team stumbled onto something strange. Right below the tombs, they hit a layer of clean, water-laid silt, 11 feet thick. No pottery, no ashes, no sign of people at all. Just pure, empty mud. Digging deeper, Woolley found the remains of an older world: crushed mud brick, caved-in roofs, and broken pottery in styles nobody had seen since. Above the silt, life started up again. Below it, the old era was gone. Woolley realized he was staring at a physical line, a real moment where one age ended and another began. Imagine standing where Woolley did. The sun's gone down, Iraqi stars are just coming out, the same ones Sumerian astronomers watched thousands of years ago. You're standing on a layer of flood silt that wiped away everything the pre-flood people built. Beneath your boots, broken pottery from folks who never even saw the end coming. Above, the foundations of those who tried to start over, piecing together a world from whatever scraps they could find. That trench must have felt heavy with silence. 11 feet of sterile clay, a literal marker for the moment everything changed, when the Anunnaki's world ended and humanity had to carry on alone. And this wasn't just at Ur. The same story played out at places like Shuruppak and Kish, right across southern Mesopotamia. The dates shift a bit, most fall around 2900 BCE, but the pattern's clear. Something huge swept through. water moving with enough power to scrub the land clean and leave nothing but mud behind. But here, where things get interesting, the ancient texts don't just call this a punishment for bad behavior. They tell a different story, one that lines up in a weird way with what archaeologists have found. The Sumerian flood stories describe the disaster as more of an environmental crisis, mixed with a deliberate choice. In the Atrahasis epic, Enlil wants the flood because people are just too noisy, literally disrupting the cosmic order, not sinning. It's a bureaucratic solution. Cut down the numbers, restore balance, reset the system. The survivor's name changes, Ziusudra for the Sumerians, Atrahasis for the Akkadians. But the warning comes from Enki, who's clearly working behind Enlil's back. Enki doesn't talk straight to Ziusudra. Instead, he speaks to the wall of Ziusudra's reed house. Maybe he's being watched, maybe he's not allowed to speak directly. Either way, the message comes as a kind of code, an indirect tip-off. And the instructions, they're not vague at all. Enki says, leave your house, build a boat, forget your stuff, save your life. The boat should be round, equal length and width, roofed over like the Apsu, the deep waters below. That's not just a story detail, that's actual engineering. Most boats then were long and narrow, but a round boat spins in the water instead of flipping, which is a much safer design when the waves come from everywhere. The text even gives the dimensions, using Sumerian measurements. Turns out, it's about 200 feet across, with several decks, all sealed up tight with bitumen. The instructions even mention pouring out the bitumen, like someone who knows exactly how much you'll need. And it's not just animals on board. The text says, the seed of all living things. That sounds like an early version of preserving genetic diversity, making sure the world after the flood has everything it needs to start over. Craftsmen are on the list, too, smiths, builders, weavers. It's not only about saving life, but also saving culture and know-how, so people could actually rebuild after the waters went down. When the flood hits, the story doesn't lean on wild myths or poetic exaggeration. It just lays out the facts. For 7 days and 7 nights, the storm swept over the land. The huge boat was tossed about by the windstorms on the great waters. 7 days. It's exact, the kind of detail that sticks with someone who lived through it, not the fuzzy, many days you see in made-up tales. That same attention to real experience caught the eye of American geologist William Ryan back in the 1990s, as he was digging into ancient flood stories. When these old texts talk about waters rising to the mountains and covering the face of the earth, that's not some over-the-top fantasy if you look at it through Mesopotamian eyes. Southern Mesopotamia is flat as a pancake. The nearest mountains are way off, hundreds of miles away. So if the water rose high enough to block out the distant mountains on the horizon, if it swallowed up everything you could see from the plain, then the story checks out. It's huge, but it's local, not some planet-wide flood. Ryan's research into the Black Sea flood gives us a possible explanation. Around 5600 BCE, the Mediterranean broke through the Bosporus and turned a freshwater lake into today's salty Black Sea. The flooding was fast, brutal, and devastating for anyone living near the shore, the kind of disaster survivors would talk about for generations. The dates don't line up exactly with the Sumerian flood, but the pattern fits. Natural barriers break, water rushes in, chaos follows. Stuff like this happened more than once as the last ice age ended and sea levels shot up. Then there's something even closer to home. In 2020, researchers at the University of Chicago pulled up sediment cores from the Persian Gulf. They found signs of a massive freshwater flood around 2900 BCE, the same time as the flood layers at ancient cities like Ur and Shuruppak. Whatever caused it, whether a glacial lake burst or just weeks of insane rain, it left behind thick layers of water-deposited clay, churned up and dumped in a hurry. It's written into the earth itself. So the world really did flood, at least their world. The written record treats the flood almost like paperwork, a matter for the bureaucrats. The archaeological record shows people getting ready, sealing tablets in jars, hiding knowledge to keep it safe from the water. But one part of the flood story usually gets overlooked. When the waters finally pull back and Ziusudra offers a sacrifice, the gods, Anunnaki, come down, drawn by the smell. And what happens? Not a big party, not relief. They start negotiating. The story spells out new rules for people. Lifespans get shorter. Fertility drops. The gods pull back, putting distance between themselves and humanity. This isn't just mythology, it reads more like crisis management. The Anunnaki don't come back to run things directly. They don't want to, or maybe they can't. Whatever the reason, maybe too many people, maybe something else, the old setup just doesn't work anymore. After the flood, everything changes. And with that change, people get both a burden and a chance. The burden, running things themselves without the original designers to show them how. The chance, to take charge, to look after their own world, not as subjects but as caretakers. The Sumerian king list nails this shift down with numbers. The first king after the flood, Ger of Kish, gets 1,200 years on the throne. Still fantastic, but a big step down from the crazy long reigns before the flood. Each dynasty after that shrinks. 960 years, 840, 720. By the time you get to Uruk's first dynasty, kings rule for just decades. When history finally catches up with names we recognize, like Gilgamesh, the numbers are believable. The stories become real. This progression isn't just random chance. It moves along a kind of decay curve, almost as if something that once let people live longer was fading away, generation after generation. You can argue about why. Maybe it's actual biology changing. Maybe people just forgot the secrets to long life. Or maybe it's just the shift from thinking in cosmic time to living in human time. But the pattern doesn't really care about our explanations. The age of the Anunnaki ended. The age of humanity started. And the only knowledge that made it across that boundary was what survivors managed to scratch into clay, hide in temple walls, or copy so many times the original meaning slipped away. But the urge to save it survived. Picture this, the Penn Museum in Philadelphia late at night. Galleries empty, security guards wandering the halls. In a back room, tucked away in a drawer, sits a little clay tablet, catalog number CBS 10673. It's nothing fancy, just a school exercise, a student scribe's practice sheet from about 1800 BCE. Standard stuff for the Adaba, the old scribal schools. The writing's shaky, cramped, a bit awkward, clearly the work of someone still learning. But the text itself is solid, a hymn to Nisaba, goddess of writing and grain. In the middle of the hymn, there's this line the student probably didn't get at all. He copied it anyway, word for word, because in those schools, getting it right mattered more than actually understanding. Open for me the house of learning that was closed when the waters covered the earth. Return to me the tablet that sank beneath the great deep. Let not the ancient words be lost forever. The house of learning closed when the waters covered the earth. This isn't metaphor. It's not some mystical allegory. They meant a real place, a school, wiped out by the flood, with everyone after scrambling to piece together what little knowledge they could recover. And that tablet lost beneath the waters. Maybe it was an actual tablet, a whole archive submerged and ruined. Or maybe it's the lapis lazuli tablet, that symbol of perfect, lasting knowledge you see in Sumerian stories, the one Nisaba always holds, the one that's supposed to contain all the me, every code of civilization. Lost now, except for bits and pieces. That student nearly 4,000 years ago was helping keep all this alive without even realizing it. His clumsy little copy kept the thread going. He was holding on to knowledge whose origins were already a mystery, but everyone still knew it mattered. And that same tablet, now tucked away in a climate-controlled drawer in Philadelphia, is still doing the job its creator intended. It's still holding memory, still bearing witness. Step outside that storage room and the whole museum is quiet. But if you stop and really listen, you can almost hear something. A whisper, maybe, of responsibility, of remembering, of the heavy task handed down when the Anunnaki stepped back and left humans to figure things out. The pattern repeats. Look at Shurapak, the city where Ziusudra, the flood survivor, lived, under the ruined silt. At Kish, another thick layer of mud. The dates shift a little, hovering around 2900 BCE, but the message is the same. Something huge swept over the land. Water, so much of it, and moving so fast, it erased everything in its path and left only mud behind. When Woolley found the evidence, he sent a telegram to the British Museum that made headlines everywhere. "We have found the flood." Maybe he was playing it up, but the physical proof was there. Around 2900 BCE, a massive flood had buried ancient cities under a layer of sediment that was just too thick and too consistent to be from an ordinary flood. But here, where things get interesting, the old texts don't read the same way later stories do. Sumerian flood myths don't say the gods punished humans for being wicked. They describe it more like an environmental disaster. In the Atrahasis epic, Enlil wants to send the flood because humanity is just too noisy, literally too loud, messing with the order of the cosmos. The solution isn't moral, it's practical. Cut down the population, restore balance, reset everything. The survivor of the flood, Ziusudra if you're reading Sumerian, Atrahasis in Akkadian, Utnapishtim in the later Babylonian stories, gets a warning from the god Enki. Enki isn't exactly following the rules. He acts on his own outside of Enlil's authority. He tells the hero, build a boat, make it watertight with bitumen, load it up with every kind of living thing. The instructions don't sound like vague myth. They're clear, technical, practical, almost like a real blueprint for survival. When the flood finally comes, the story doesn't go for thunder and lightning. No fiery wrath from above, just silence. For 7 days and 7 nights the storm swept over the land. The great gods looked on in dismay. That word, dismay, changes everything. The gods aren't smug or satisfied. They look down and seem almost regretful. The Anunnaki watch the disaster they set in motion, but the feeling isn't one of triumph. It's closer to sorrow. There's a heartbreaking moment where the goddess Ninhursag just breaks down. She weeps as she sees cities, her own creations, washed away. This isn't the biblical flood where justice wipes out corruption. This feels colder, emptier. It's not about punishing evil. It's about pulling back, ending an era, shutting a door not out of necessity but by choice. And when the waters finally go down, everything feels different. Ziusudra in the Eridu Genesis offers a sacrifice. The Anunnaki accept it, but they don't step back into rule. Instead, they set new rules, a covenant. Humanity can go on, but the game has changed. Lifespans get shorter. The gods keep their distance. The world runs, but it's managed from afar. You see this shift in the king list. Before the flood, there are 8 kings, each ruling for thousands of years, and the gods are directly involved. After the flood, kingship descends from heaven again, but this time it's for humans. Lifespans shrink with every generation. Ge'er of Kish, the first king after the flood, rules for 1200 years. Still superhuman, but already much less than before. Then it drops 960 years, 840, 720, and by the first dynasty of Uruk, it's just decades. By the time you hit real historical kings, the numbers are ordinary. 18 years, 36, 25. The decline isn't random. It feels like the world itself is winding down, moving away from the old mythic age. The scribes aren't just making up legends. They're marking a line: before the flood, one world; after, something entirely new. The flood didn't wipe out knowledge. It just broke the chain. What made it through were shards, tablets baked hard by fire, buried deep, hidden in temple foundations where future scribes could dig them up and copy them. The Sumerians saw themselves as rediscoverers, not inventors. They translated from languages already ancient, followed instructions they barely grasped. There's a phrase that keeps popping up in temple dedications after the flood: I have restored it according to the old writings. Not I built this my way, not I improved it. Always, according to the old writings. Authority doesn't flow forward. It runs backward to origins nobody can quite reach, to knowledge treated like an inheritance. So the flood, if you read it this way, didn't end the world. It ended a style of rule. The land survived. The rivers receded. Plants grew back. Animals returned. But the old administration gone, the Anunnaki step out of the foreground. They become judges, not rulers, observers, not builders. People are left running systems they didn't design, following blueprints they can read but not truly understand. And here's the question the texts keep circling. If the Anunnaki stopped ruling directly, how did humans rebuild a world that never really belonged to them in the first place? Once in the Baghdad Museum, before everything scattered, there was a brick that stood out from the rest. It came from the Enki ziggurat in Babylon, the place Greek writers called the Tower of Babel. Pressed into the clay was a cuneiform inscription from King Nebuchadnezzar II, about 600 BCE. The writing, strikingly precise. Nebuchadnezzar didn't brag, "I built this," or "Look what I created." Instead, he said, "I have rebuilt the Enki to its ancient height. I raised its top to heaven as it was in former times." For the king of one of history's mightiest empires, that's a humble way to frame your biggest architectural achievement. He saw himself as a restorer, not an inventor. And he wasn't just spinning a story. Archaeologists digging under those bricks found proof, layers of older foundations, each one stacked on the ruins of the last, stretching back thousands of years. Every version followed the same 7-tier blueprint, the same orientation, the same sacred math. Nebuchadnezzar didn't dream up the ziggurat, he inherited it. He poured massive resources into making sure it matched a design that was already ancient to him. But what were ziggurats really? Not temples in the way we usually think, no statues tucked away, no ordinary altars for sacrifices. They were stranger than that. If you read the Sumerian texts literally, not symbolically, the picture changes. The Sumerians called them Enki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Not a house dedicated to heaven and earth, but a house of the actual foundation, the anchor point where cosmic order touched down in the real world. The building itself was the connection, the bridge between above and below. Look at the design. You start with a huge square platform lined up perfectly with the cardinal directions. That takes some serious astronomy. Then you stack smaller platforms on top, each set back, making that classic stepped pyramid. On the very top, a tiny temple chamber, just big enough for a handful of people, carefully lined up to catch certain stars or planets on the horizon. 7 tiers mattered. That number matched the 7 visible planets: Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Each tier had its own color mapped to the planets. At Babylon, the bottom was black for Saturn, then white for Jupiter, red for Mars, orange gold for the Sun, yellow for Venus, blue for Mercury, silver for the Moon. Climbing the ziggurat was like moving through the spheres of the heavens from earth to sky. At the top, there's the Jiganu, the summit chamber. It was furnished, but not for people. Not even priests hung out there during ceremonies. Herodotus, the Greek historian, saw it in the 5th century BCE and couldn't make sense of it. At the summit there is a great temple with a couch beautifully appointed, and beside it a golden table. But no image stands there, nor does anyone spend the night there save only one native woman, whomever the god chooses. He was confused because he expected a Greek temple with statues and priests and rituals. But this wasn't for humans. The couch, the table, the chamber, they were all waiting. For what? The texts spell it out, for the god's descent. Not a statue, not a symbol, the god himself. The Anunnaki who once ruled the city, who walked among people before the flood, might come back. If they did, everything was ready. A platform above the city, a chamber set and waiting. Sounds far-fetched, right? Not so much when you check the records. Temple archives from Uruk, Nippur, all over list the daily upkeep of these summit chambers. Fresh bread delivered, beer and wine restocked. Bed linens changed, every day, every year, for centuries. Even when no one remembered the last time a god had actually shown up, the rituals kept going. The chambers stayed ready. Why? Because for the Sumerians, the ziggurat wasn't just a symbol. It was the real deal. Letting the summit fall apart would mean admitting the Anunnaki were never coming back, that the age of gods ruling directly was gone for good, that people were on their own. The The Sumerians wouldn't accept that. So they kept building, kept maintaining, kept preparing, generation after generation, even when the purpose faded into mystery. In the 1930s, American archaeologist Henry Frankfurt found something in Tel Asmar that backs this up. Hidden in a storeroom beneath a ziggurat from around 2600 BCE, some sealed jars held tablets describing the building's construction. One phrase kept popping up: built according to the plan of heaven, as it was shown to the builder in the time before forgetting. The plan of heaven, it wasn't something people just made up or sketched out on a whim. It was passed down, handed over by those who really understood how the cosmos worked to those who wanted to copy it. There was a time before everyone forgot, when people just knew things. Everything made sense. Then, slowly, memory faded. People kept the rituals, but the full meaning slipped away. You see it in the way these ancient buildings line up with the stars. Every ziggurat that's been studied closely shows exact alignments to things happening in the sky. At Uruk, the white temple lines up so that its corners hit the sunrise and sunset points during the solstice. At the entrance to the top chamber faces right where Sirius, brightest star in the night sky, rises, which marked the Sumerian New Year, Nippur's ziggurat. Its summit sight lines match up with where certain stars set, the same stars they used to tell time. None of this is random. These aren't just close enough alignments that happen to look intentional if you squint. The lines are precise, planned down to the smallest degree, the result of people watching the sky and doing some serious math. And what's wild is, this level of know-how shows up in the earliest ziggurats we've found. The knowledge had to come first before the bricks were even stacked. The builders were following instructions, templates, really, that already had all this astronomical understanding baked in. And here's the thing that keeps archaeologists up at night. The precision is almost spooky. It goes beyond what we think their tools could do. The Sumerians were clever, no doubt, but to line up massive buildings so exactly, so that sight lines run true across hundreds of meters, it takes either tools we haven't found yet, or knowledge from someone, or somewhere else who had those tools. Dr. Alessandro Bistock from UCLA, who's a big deal in archaeoastronomy, looked at a ton of temple alignments in Mesopotamia and summed up the puzzle pretty bluntly. The precision in these structures consistently exceeds what known Sumerian technology should have allowed. Either we're missing something big about their methods, or they got this knowledge from an earlier, more advanced culture. That word inherited keeps coming up. When you can't explain how something so advanced appears out of nowhere, when the oldest examples are actually the best ones, and when there's no sign of slow progress, inheritance starts to make the most sense. Someone knew, someone taught, someone handed down the secrets for building these places, and the Sumerians took those instructions and built exactly what they were told. Look at Eridu. The oldest temple there, Temple XVI, goes back to around 5400 BCE. People at that time were supposed to be simple farmers, but even then, the temple's entrance points 15 degrees north of east, catching the sunrise on the spring equinox. 7,000 years ago, in a place we wouldn't call civilized, someone already knew how to mark the equinox with stone. And every temple built on that spot after kept the same alignment, not roughly, perfectly, as if changing it would be a betrayal, like the orientation itself was sacred. Honestly, if you stand at one of these old sites after the diggers leave and the desert goes quiet, you can almost feel it, the weight of intention. The sense that sticking to the plan really mattered. These weren't just buildings. They were messages, written in stone and brick, saying, "We remember. Maybe we don't understand it all, but we remember." We keep what was handed down because forgetting would mean losing the link to an age when heaven and earth touched, when the Anunnaki could walk among people and answer questions directly. Some ziggurats still stand. Others are just heaps of mud brick under the sand. But every carefully placed brick, every level painted the right color, every summit chamber ready and waiting was a kind of hope. Maybe if they kept the faith, the gods would come back. Maybe the silence wasn't permanent. Maybe, if people proved themselves good caretakers, the Anunnaki would return and the world would make sense again. You see this pattern everywhere in Mesopotamia. Every big city, same story, people built to remember. Architecture wasn't just shelter, it was a way to anchor memory in the ground. Take Eridu, for example. When archaeologists dug there in the 1940s, they hit Temple XVI at the very bottom, the oldest layer, around 5400 BCE. The thing was small, but you could tell it was carefully planned. Rectangular shrine, niches for offerings, altar platform, a central hearth for the sacred fire. Then right on top, Temple XV, same blueprint, just a little bigger. Above that, Temple XIV. Again, same design, scaled up. This went on for 18 layers over 3,000 years. They'd bury each old temple under clean sand, then build the new one right over it, always keeping the same layout, same orientation, same altar spot. Only the size changed. Someone set this pattern at the very beginning, and every generation after kept it going, no matter how much the world around them shifted. Languages changed, dynasties came and went, the original builders faded into legend. By the time they got to Temple I, the one you'd actually see in the historical period, it was a massive platform temple. But under it, 17 other versions, each a faithful echo of the first. This idea runs straight into the ziggurat too. Those stepped pyramids climbing into the sky, honestly, they weren't practical at all. No storage, no defenses, nobody lived in them. People poured in millions of mud bricks, decades of work, whole cities pitching in, just to raise a building with a purely symbolic purpose. They called them Itemenenkai in Sumerian, house of the foundation of heaven and earth. That name gives it away. These weren't monuments to kings or vague tributes to gods. They were built as bridges, tying the ground to the sky, showing a universe where heaven and earth matched each other and needed a connection. If you look at the way they lined things up, that just adds to the story. Ziggurat corners hit the cardinal points with dead-on accuracy. You can't get that by accident. At Uruk, the White Temple sits on a platform tilted 15 degrees off north, exactly matching the city street grid. It's like the whole city was designed around the stars. But here's the weird part. The oldest ziggurats came before advanced math, before written astronomy, before anyone left behind records of the kind of surveying you need for this. Still, the alignments are baked into the first buildings. Either those early builders knew a lot more than we can prove, or they were copying plans handed down from somewhere even older. There's this inscription from the temple of Ningirsu at Lagash, around 2050 BCE. King Gudea dreams that the goddess Nadaba appears, holding a lapis lazuli tablet with the temple's design on it. She tells him to build what he sees. People usually read this as some mystical vision, divine inspiration. But if you take it at face value, it's describing something pretty practical. Passing down blueprints, old documents treated as sacred because nobody remembered where they came from. Gudea doesn't invent anything new. He checks, he measures, he copies the plan. When the temple's done, he carves the same line you see all over Mesopotamia. I have made it as it was in ancient days. The cities themselves follow this logic. Uruk's grid, the layout of Nippur's temple district, these patterns show up fully formed right from the start. There's no sign of trial and error, no slow evolution. The cities just appear, organized, like they're following instructions from before anyone can remember. At Nippur, archaeologists found something wild. A clay map from around 1500 BCE showing the whole city. Parks, temples, gates, canals, everything marked out. But here's the catch. Some buildings on the map hadn't existed for centuries. They'd been destroyed, neighborhoods long gone. So this map wasn't just a snapshot of the city as it was. It was a memory of the ideal layout, a vision of how things were supposed to be, even if nobody could keep it that way anymore. That brings up a question the texts themselves just can't answer. Where did the knowledge to rebuild these cities actually come from? If people got it from the Anunnaki, what did those ancient gods really teach? And how did that know-how survive the disaster of the flood? Let's look at a clue. In the British Museum, there's a little clay fragment called K160. Honestly, it's about the size of a smartphone. Archaeologists dug it up in the 1800s from the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. That place was basically a time capsule, packed with thousands of years of collected knowledge. The tablet itself is a math text from around 1800 BCE, but the scribe says he copied it from ancient writings from before the flood. On the tablet's surface, there's a geometric problem. Find the diagonal of a rectangle. It's what we call the Pythagorean theorem today. The scribe doesn't act like he's discovering something new or working things out. He just writes the answer, straightforward, no explanation, no proof, just the solution as if he's copying it from some old manual he can't even trace. Right below the math, there's a little note in Akkadian. According to the old text, wisdom from the house of Enki. Enki was the god in charge of fresh water and wisdom, the keeper of what the Sumerians called Namku, the secrets of craft. He didn't invent math, not really. He just passed it on, kept it safe. You see this pattern everywhere you look. Knowledge isn't discovered, it's handed down. Scribes and priests say it was given to them, revealed by someone or something older than their own civilization. This is clearest when it comes to writing, the tool that made it possible to save any of this knowledge in the first place. Cuneiform pops up in the archaeological record around 3400 BCE. It starts in Uruk and spreads fast across Mesopotamia. And from the start, it's already a complete system, over 700 signs that can show syllables, words, even abstract ideas. Most writing systems, like Egyptian hieroglyphs or Chinese characters, start with simple drawings and slowly get more complicated over centuries. Our alphabet went through all sorts of versions before it landed where it is now. But cuneiform, it just shows up ready to go. The earliest tablets from Uruk already handle complex accounting, legal deals, administration, even astronomy. There's no sign of a slow, clumsy beginning. No awkward step from pictures to words. It's like someone designed it on purpose, not like it just grew on its own. Back in the 1970s, linguist Denise Schmant-Besserat suggested cuneiform came from earlier clay tokens. These tokens, small clay shapes, stood for things like grain, animals, or oil, and have been found from around 3500 BCE. Her idea was that the symbols on clay tablets came from pressing these tokens flat, but that doesn't quite fit. Jumping from tokens to a full-blown writing system takes a level of abstract thinking you'd expect to see developing in stages, with half-formed signs and lots of trial and error. But there's nothing like that in the record. What if both tokens and writing just appeared at the same time? What if someone actually taught people record-keeping as a finished package, showing how to use tokens for tracking things in the moment and written symbols for keeping records long-term? That's exactly what the archaeology shows. Both systems showing up together, both already working, both fitting neatly into a pretty advanced system for running things. The Sumerians themselves never claimed to invent writing. Whenever they talk about it, they say it was revealed to them. The goddess Nisaba, patron of scribes, is the one who opened the house of learning and revealed the tablet. Hymns from Uruk praise her, lady who possesses the lapis lazuli tablet, who grasps the secrets of wisdom, who opens the house where the me are kept. The lapis lazuli tablet keeps coming up, a symbol for knowledge that lasts forever, information written in a form that can't be destroyed. There's even a school text from Nippur, written around 1900 BCE, that every student scribe had to learn. It's a prayer. Nisaba, who knows the inmost secrets, grant me your wisdom. Open for me the tablet that was closed when the great waters covered the earth. Let not the ancient script be lost forever. Cuneiform doesn't have a tidy origin story. Some signs look like pictures, sure, but plenty are just abstract shapes, no clear link to what they're supposed to mean. Right from the start, you also find signs that don't stand for things at all, just for sounds. So you end up with this weird mix, pictographs and phonetic symbols, both showing up together in the earliest texts. That's not how most writing systems develop. Usually, people start with drawings and only add phonetic elements later. But cuneiform, both right out of the gate. Dr. Christopher Woods, a Sumerologist at the University of Chicago, dug into this in 2015. He used new imaging tech on the oldest Uruk tablets and came away impressed. His take: the writing system shows a level of sophistication you wouldn't expect from something brand new. You see this blend of logographic and phonetic signs, the same forms showing up in different scribes' hands, and right away, the signs can capture abstract ideas. It all points to either a wild, almost impossible burst of innovation, or a system that people already understood before anyone started pressing clay tablets. Already understood, passed on, given, not invented. It's the same language the Sumerians used to talk about everything they knew. Someone taught them. Someone who grasped language deeply enough to build a writing system that could hold not just nouns but verbs, not just things but relationships, not just facts but whole concepts. If writing was taught, if, as the texts claim, it was revealed instead of slowly invented, then every single tablet is more than a record. Each one shows knowledge moving from teacher to student, from those who knew to those who didn't. In the Louvre, tucked away in the Department of Near Eastern Antiquities, there's a tablet called AO 6018. It's a school exercise from Nippur, dating back to around 1750 BCE. A student was practicing, copying out an old text. The handwriting's shaky and uneven. You can tell the scribe was just starting out. But what he was copying was a hymn to Enki. In the middle of it, there's a passage that's puzzled scholars ever since the tablet came to light in 1923. Enki put the me in order. He made the earth bring forth. He founded the house of learning in Eridu, the city of wisdom. He opened the tablet of lapis lazuli before it was forgotten. He taught the pure speech before it changed into many tongues. Back when everyone spoke one language and writing was new but already ancient. Writing that was new but already ancient. One language that would later splinter into many. Knowledge that had to be saved before it was forgotten. That's not just nostalgia. There's an edge of loss there, like they're trying to hang on to something that's slipping away. For decades, scholars have argued about this. Most say it's just myth, a golden age fantasy scribes invented to make their own time look worse by comparison. But if you take it at face value, it hints at something else. A turning point, a time when one language and culture broke apart, when knowledge had to be written down fast because the old ways of passing it on by word of mouth were failing. What was already ancient was becoming new, because the people using it weren't the ones who made it. The Tower of Babel story from the Hebrew Bible says something similar. Everyone spoke the same language until God scattered them and mixed up their tongues. The Sumerian story is older by more than 1,000 years. Maybe they're both remembering the same thing, some distant memory, passed down in different cultures. So what if that memory's real? What if before the flood or some other disaster, there really was a common language? Imagine knowledge moving freely, no language barriers, nothing getting lost in translation. Then disaster strikes. The survivors are scattered, languages diverge, and suddenly you can't trust words to make it across generations unless you write them down. That's when writing stops being an invention and starts being a lifeline. The Sumerian language makes this whole picture a lot clearer. It's an oddball, no cousins, no connections to any other language family. People have tried to tie it to Semitic, Indo-European, you name it, but nothing sticks. Sumerian just stands apart, like its speakers showed up from somewhere, or maybe someone, outside the normal flow of language history. If Sumerian is the last echo of a language family wiped out by some ancient flood, then its isolation isn't much of a mystery. But writing does what the spoken language couldn't. Even after Sumerian faded away and Akkadian took over, the cuneiform script stuck around. Sure, people tweaked it to fit new languages, but the basics didn't change. The signs pressed into clay in 1000 BCE look just like the ones from 3,000 years earlier. The whole system was built so well, it survived empires crumbling, languages dying, cultures transforming. That kind of staying power says something. Somebody built this system on purpose. Somebody invented a way to trap knowledge in marks pressed into wet clay, marks that could outlast generations. They understood how to lock memory into something solid, something permanent. The Sumerians credited Nisaba for that. They told stories about the moment writing appeared, the house of learning opening, the ancient script, already old, becoming available to everyone. Who was Nisaba? Maybe a real teacher, maybe a symbol, maybe even an actual divine being who oversaw knowledge itself. Doesn't matter. The result was the same. Writing just showed up, fully formed, ready to use. And look what it did. Every law code, every astronomical log, every medical recipe, every bit of math, every hymn, every king list, every flood story preserved. All of it balanced on a writing system that came out of nowhere, worked right away, and lasted 5,000 years. Sometimes in those early hours before sunrise, when the museum is dead quiet and tablets rest in their drawers under a dull security light, you can almost feel the weight of it all. Thousands of scribes, over thousands of years, copying texts they didn't always understand, clinging to knowledge whose roots had faded into legend. They preserved it because the alternative, forgetting, just wasn't an option. They kept doing what Nisaba taught, kept up the system Enki set in motion, kept copying that old script to keep it alive. They held onto the inheritance the Anunnaki left when they withdrew after the flood, leaving humans to guard knowledge they hadn't invented. And now it's our turn. We're still reading those tablets, still piecing together the script, still finding out what they worked so hard to save. We're the latest link in this chain that started before history, before writing, before civilization. The message is simple. This is what we got. This is what we saved. This is what we have to pass on. That's what being a custodian really means. Not just taking care of buildings or copying old tablets, but making sure knowledge survives. Making sure the thread stretches unbroken from those who knew to those who need to know, through disaster and darkness and the slow fade of memory. The Sumerians got it. Every tablet they made carried that responsibility. Every copy from an older text proved it. Every school that taught cuneiform was another link in the chain. This was the great relay, stretching back to the first moment knowledge was handed down, when writing was revealed, when the Anunnaki taught and humans learned. Now we're holding the end of that chain. 5,000 years after Uruk and Eridu, we're reading words pressed into clay by hands that turned to dust before Rome was even a thought. We're decoding knowledge handed down through empires rising and falling. We're inheriting stories from a world before the flood, before civilization, before humanity ran its own show. What we do with this matters. We can keep it alive or we can let it slip away. We can honor the chain or we can break it. The choice is ours, pass it on whole or let it sink back into the mud where it all began. The tablets sit in the dark just waiting. They've always done this, holding their message steady, patient, letting time pass over them. Kingship came down from the sky. Knowledge wasn't invented, it was handed over. The Anunnaki ran things before the flood came. When the waters finally pulled back, humanity stepped into a world that was already mapped out, already put in order, already finished. Our job isn't to fix it or make it better. We're here to keep things going. We're not supposed to outdo the past, just to keep it alive. It's not ours to claim as something we built, but something we're supposed to honor because we inherited it. This is how Mesopotamian texts talk about their own roots. They see themselves as heirs, not inventors. You see the same idea in every field they cared about. Even writing, the one thing that lets knowledge last through the ages, wasn't seen as a human breakthrough. They said the goddess Nisaba gave it to them. Temple hymns don't call her a muse or a spark of genius. They say she revealed the tablet, opened the house of learning. She didn't inspire someone to make something new. She let them see what was already there, just waiting. There's this old tablet from Uruk, about 2600 BCE. It's a prayer to Nisaba, scribes reciting before their lessons. Lady who knows the inmost secrets, who possesses the lapis lazuli tablet, Open for me the secrets of your wisdom. The lapis lazuli tablet wasn't just a pretty thing. It meant knowledge that was solid, unchanging, carved in stone, not something someone just came up with. It was there before any scribe, before any teacher, even before anyone learned to write. And when cuneiform shows up in the archaeological record around 3400 BCE, it's all there at once. Over 700 signs, not just for sounds or words, but even for bigger ideas. There aren't any half-formed scripts, no rough drafts. It shows up fully developed, right from the beginning, ready for legal contracts, accounting, record-keeping, the whole deal. Denise Schmant-Besserat, the linguist, suggested cuneiform came from clay tokens used for counting stuff. But those tokens, they pop up around 3500 BCE, fully formed too, little geometric shapes for grain, animals, oil. No slow buildup, no obvious predecessors. And jumping from three-dimensional tokens to two-dimensional writing isn't a small step. That kind of leap should have left marks, should have looked messy for a while. But we don't see that. The system just appears finished. This is the question archaeologists murmur to each other in the museum basements, late at night when the crowds are gone and it's just them and the tablets. What if the Sumerians were right? What if knowledge really was handed down? What if the Anunnaki, whoever they were, taught humanity the basics, then left, leaving only the instructions? Keep what we gave you going. Even the astronomical texts fit this story. The Venus tablets of Amisajuka, copied around 1650 BCE, track Venus with mind-blowing precision. They record when Venus rises and sets, vanishing behind the sun and then coming back over 21 years. The details are too good for a single lifetime. To get accuracy like that, you need centuries of watching, tracking cycles that repeat every 8 years, but keep drifting against the calendar. Somebody had to notice the pattern and stick with it for generations. Here's the weird thing. These records aren't new findings at all. The texts actually say they come from even older tablets, way back to the first dynasty of Babylon, around 1900 BCE. And those were already copies of something earlier. There's a scribbled note in the margin, according to the old observations of Anu and Enlil. Anu and Enlil, two of the main Anunnaki, ancient gods credited with knowing the stars before any human king showed up. The scribes never claim these are their own discoveries. They're just keeping the knowledge alive, passing down astronomy that stretches so far back its origins are lost. The Mulapin tablets, dated to around 1000 BCE, actually gather material from at least 1,000 years before that. They list constellations, track how planets move, describe the sky like it's a familiar old friend. There's none of that uncertainty you'd expect from people just starting out. It reads like experts keeping up a tradition they've always known. Medicine works the same way. Take the diagnostic handbook from the physician Esigil Kinoply, written around 1000 BCE but leaning on even older sources. It lays out symptoms, diagnoses, and outcomes for dozens of illnesses. The details are sharp, feeling the pulse, checking a patient's skin, watching for fever, noting changes in what comes out of the body. It's all so methodical, as if doctors had been practicing and organizing this stuff for ages. And again, the text doesn't credit recent doctors. It says Ninurta and Gyula, gods tied to healing, taught the physician's art. The pattern repeats. Knowledge isn't discovered, it's revealed. Passed down from the divine, handed off to humans. You see it clearest in the legal codes. The Code of Ur-Nammu from about 2100 BCE is often called the first law code ever. But even that claim falls apart if you read the prologue. Ur-Nammu doesn't present himself as the inventor of law. He says he restored it. After kingship descended from heaven, after Anu and Enlil gave the city to Nana, I established justice in the land according to the true word of Udu. Udu, the sun god, he's the one tied to justice and truth. The laws aren't just made up by kings. They're eternal principles always there waiting to be enforced. Ur-Nammu's real contribution was bringing them back after chaos, not creating them out of thin air. And the laws themselves, they're not crude. There are different punishments depending on the crime, rules for intent versus accident, protections for widows and orphans, regulations on contracts and property. This isn't justice slowly figuring itself out. This is a complex system being put back in place after a break. Look across every field: astronomy, medicine, law. It's the same story. Knowledge doesn't slowly creep forward. It just shows up, fully formed, as if someone remembered it all at once. These aren't breakthroughs, they're acts of recalling something already known. The Sumerians even had a word for this: me. People sometimes translate it as divine decree or sacred ordinance, but that misses the mark. The me weren't just rules, they were the blueprints for reality. Codes, principles, formulas that shaped not just society, but the universe itself. There were over 100 me, each tied to a piece of life. Kingship, priesthood, music, metalwork, writing, warfare, justice, love, how to decide things. Whoever held the me held the key to civilization. And according to the old stories, mortals didn't invent them. Enki, lord of the waters, kept them hidden deep in the Abzu, the primal depths below the earth. Only the gods could decide when to share them with humans. There's one story where Inanna, the goddess, visits Enki in Eridu. She gets him drunk, tricks him into giving her the me, loads them onto her boat, and sails home to Uruk. Enki wakes up, realizes what happened, tries to get them back, but it's too late. Inanna's already gone, and the knowledge is out in the world. It's a strange myth, but there's something real underneath. Knowledge isn't invented. It's borrowed, remembered, handed down. It's always out there somewhere, just waiting to be found again. Civilizations don't build it from scratch. They survive or vanish based on how well they can hold on to it, piece it back together, and pass it along. Maybe that's what the Sumerians were saying. Their science, their astronomy, their medicine, it wasn't the result of slow progress. It was an act of memory. They were gathering up what the flood almost wiped away, patching together the remnants of a system that once was whole. The survivors didn't really start over from scratch. They started from the wreckage. Scattered through those ruins were clues, old tools, carved symbols, star maps, half-remembered formulas. Enough to start again if only they could recall what any of it meant. Maybe progress isn't some grand invention after all. Maybe it's just this slow, aching effort to remember what we once knew. I think the Sumerians, stepping out of the flood with mud still on their hands, might have understood that better than we ever will. Civilization isn't something we build from nothing. We patch it back together. Science doesn't always mean brand new discoveries. Sometimes it's about recovering what's been lost. Every symbol pressed into wet clay, every chart drawn to match the stars, every bronze tool hammered out in the fire, it's not just proof of human genius. It's a record of survival. It says, here, what we managed to save. Here, what the flood couldn't wash away. Here, what the Anunnaki showed us before they vanished. But where did the Anunnaki go? And honestly, did they leave because they wanted to, or because they had no choice? What if the flood didn't just break the world apart, but made it impossible for humans and the Anunnaki to share the same space anymore? The tablets don't answer. They record the departure, not the destination. The Anunnaki slip from presence into distance, from rulers into watchers, from teachers into invisible lawmakers. The texts just lay it out, plain and undramatic, like this was simply how the world had to be after the flood. But read between the lines and you'll feel something else, almost grief, but not quite. It's the sense that the real loss wasn't just the cities or the people, it was closeness, the direct handoff of knowledge that made civilization possible in the first place. After the flood, people had to keep the gears turning without the ones who'd built the machine. Blueprints with no one to explain them, laws written by strangers, knowledge without a guide. This, maybe, is the real legacy the Sumerians took on. Not just the me, the tablets, the grand temples, and the star charts, but the weight of keeping it all alive. The duty to protect what was left, to pass it on, to make sure the next generation didn't lose everything the flood almost wiped away. Every scribe copying a fading tablet was taking up that task. Every king rebuilding a temple on old foundations. Every priest repeating forgotten rituals. They were all holding that line. So the Anunnaki, at least in this light, weren't gods in the way we usually think. They were something stranger, more particular. Administrators of order who, for reasons the texts can barely describe, couldn't stay. The flood wasn't their punishment. It was the thing that forced them to step back. After that, the world had to run differently, at a distance, relying on what had been handed down, not on direct teaching. From that moment on, humanity had to figure things out with only the leftover instructions. We had to read the maps no one could explain. We had to enforce laws whose reasons faded to little more than, "This is how it's always been." Walk through a museum after hours, with the lights buzzing and your footsteps echoing, and you'll feel it. The weight of inheritance, the strain of being the caretaker. Every clay tablet tucked away in a drawer is a fragment of that responsibility. Scribes 5,000 years ago knew exactly what was on the line. The Sumerians never claimed to be the beginning. They were always the next step, the ones who kept it going. Not inventors, but heirs. Not authors, but translators. Not architects, but caretakers for what came before, what almost disappeared when the flood hit and the Anunnaki left. And if they were right, if kingship really did come down from the sky twice, once before the flood and once after, then the story we tell about civilization flips upside down. We're not the peak of progress, steadily climbing from darkness to light. We're the survivors of a break, the ones tracing the outlines of something old, the caretakers of knowledge we didn't create and still don't fully grasp. The tablets don't really leave room for doubt if we're actually listening. They say it straight. This is the restoration of what was before. Not something new, not something discovered. Restoration. Rebuilding what once existed. Remembering and holding on to what was handed down before it could disappear for good. Maybe that's the real message the Anunnaki wanted us to get. It's not just about the knowledge itself, though sure, that mattered. It's about the act of keeping things alive. The clay tablets, fired hard so they'd outlast the winds and the rain. The temples, rebuilt again and again on that same patch of sacred ground. The star charts, copied long after anyone remembered why the stars were so important. They handed us the job of remembering, and here we are still at it 5,000 years later. Down in museum basements, hunched over in university libraries, piecing together cuneiform, digging up broken walls, still chasing the thread of what they were trying to say about us, about where we come from. The desert wind sweeps over Iraq just before sunrise. Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, they sleep under drifting sand, hidden and exposed, buried and revealed, a little different every day. And somewhere underneath the clay waits, patient, tough, holding on to those wedge-shaped marks pressed by hands that already knew what it felt like to be the last ones who remembered. So what if they were right? What if the world we live in really was built by someone else long before us? What if the Anunnaki, whatever they were, actually did come down, set up civilization, taught humanity how to build order out of chaos, and then stepped away, leaving us to keep the lights on? You can't prove it, but you can't really prove it wrong either. In that space between belief and disbelief, the tablets keep whispering. Kingship came from heaven. Knowledge wasn't earned, it was given. The me existed before we even knew how to use them. The Anunnaki ruled before the flood, and when the waters pulled back, they let humanity govern itself with the tools they'd left behind. If that's how it happened, then we're not at the beginning of civilization. We're living in its aftermath. We're not inventors, we're the heirs. Not pioneers, but caretakers of something ancient, something more elegant and complex than we tend to admit, and a whole lot more fragile than we'd like to think. Maybe that's why the Sumerians wrote everything down, not to brag, but to make sure we'd remember, to make certain that, even if disaster hit again, if the rivers rose, the cities fell, or the knowledge faded, something would survive. A single clay tablet fired hard and hidden in the rubble, a wedge-shaped mark tucked away in the dark, some record reaching across centuries to say, this is what happened, this is what we inherited. The Anunnaki themselves are gone now, just names in myths and stories, their presence faded away. But the legacy sticks around. It's in every minute that ticks by, every circle we divide into 360 degrees, every law that protects the weak and reigns in the strong. It's in every astronomical chart that still ties us to the stars. And in every act of preservation, there's this quiet insistence. This matters. Don't let it disappear. Pass it on. We're still the custodians of what the Anunnaki taught, whether they were gods, kings, or just people lost to the flood. We're still running on their systems, still following their designs, still measuring time with their math and keeping order with their laws. And sometimes in those silent moments, in a museum basement, in the dust at an excavation, in that strange pause between translating a word and really understanding it, you catch a glimpse of them. The Anunnaki, not speaking out loud but present anyway, in the exactness of the star charts, the shape of the math, the clarity of the laws, the toughness of the clay. They left us a world already mapped out, already ordered, already whole. What the Sumerians understood, what they tried so hard to record, is that our job isn't to outdo it, it's to protect it, to remember what was given, to keep what was established alive, to make sure the knowledge survives no matter what storms come next. Because if catastrophe hit once, it can hit again. If civilization staggered once, it can fall again. If knowledge nearly vanished once, it can almost vanish again. The Sumerians saw it coming. That's why they wrote in clay, fired in flames. That's why they hid tablets in temple walls. That's why they kept copying ancient texts, even when nobody spoke the language anymore. They built so we wouldn't forget, not just to hold back another flood, but to make sure the lessons of the Anunnaki didn't vanish if humans ever dropped the ball. 5,000 years later, here we are, still poring over their tablets, still digging up their ruins, still trying to figure out what they wanted us to remember. We're caretakers of something we didn't invent, but it's ours to look after now. Maybe that's humanity's real story. Not some tale of bold innovation, but a quieter, tougher disciplined preservation. It's not always about discovery or progress. Sometimes it's about remembering, about carrying the weight of what came before. The Anunnaki came from the sky, taught us how to live, then stepped back after the flood. They left behind a world already set up and handed us the job of keeping it running. The tablets aren't subtle about it. They spell it out. If we bother to listen, if we let go of this idea that ancient people were clueless, or that we're the center of everything, if we really take them at their word, maybe the Sumerians weren't making it up. Maybe they were just telling it straight. They weren't starting from scratch. They were rebuilding, restoring, patching together pieces of what the Anunnaki had put in place before the flood messed everything up. Not inventors, but heirs. Not founders, but survivors. Their job wasn't to create civilization, but to keep it alive, even if all they had left were fragments. So if that's true, the question is, where did the Anunnaki go? It's, what are we going to do with what they left us? Will we honor it by preserving it, keep their systems running, pass on their knowledge uncorrupted, whole to those who come after us? That's what it means to be a custodian. It's not about owning. It's about stewarding, not about creating but preserving, not about chasing the new but staying true to what we've received. The Sumerians understood this. Every time they rebuilt a temple on old foundations, every time they copied a tablet from an even older one, every time they kept up a ritual long after its meaning faded, they were showing how seriously they took the job. They knew what was at stake. Maybe we need to remember that too. In a world where everything's changing at breakneck speed, maybe we should listen to the Sumerians. Some knowledge is just too important to lose. Some systems matter too much to toss aside. Some things need to be kept just as they are, because we don't really grasp what we've inherited or why. The Anunnaki left a world already mapped out, already measured, already running on laws we're still trying to crack. Like it or not, our job is to keep it going, to live up to the responsibility, to make sure what they left actually survives.